Hello, good morning. Welcome to online classes. Online classes for UG students COVID 19 for the academic year 2020-21. This is Pinnit Ramreddy, lecturer in English, Government Degree College, Mahbubabad, District Mahbubabad. Today, our topic is The Pleasures of Ignorance by Robert Lynd. The Robert Wilson Lynd, he was an Irish Robert O'Flynn, was born on 20th April in 1879 and died on 6th October in 1949. Was an Irish writer, editor of poetry, urban literary essayist, and strong Irish nationalist. This Robert Lynd, he belongs to Ireland, Irish country, and he was born in the on 20th April in 1879 and left this world 6th October 1949. He was a writer and a editor of poetry, and he was worked on urban literary essayist and strong Irish nationalist. So he fought for the Irish nationalism. See, this is the picture of that Robert Wilson Lynd. He was born on 20th April 1879, Belfast, Ireland, and died on 6th October in 1949 at the age of 70. Hampstead, London, England. He was died at Hampstead, London, at England. Resting place Belfast City Cemetery. The known languages to him English and Irish. His nationality British. Genres essays, poems. And he was written essays and also the poems. Literary movement Irish literary revival. Years active. He was worked actively during 1906 to 1949. His spouse name was Sylvia Dryhurst. Children Mary and Sigil. Relatives Tim Wheeler, Robert Lynd, Eskin Lorry, that grand nephew. He was born He was born in Belfast to Robert John Lynd, a Presbyterian minister, and Sarah Rental Lynd, the second of seven children. Lynd's paternal great grandfather immigrated from Scotland to Ireland. This Robert Lynd was born to the Robert John Lynd. His father name was Robert John Lynd. He was a Presbyterian minister, and his mother name was Sarah Rental Lynd. He was the second of seven children. Their parents was seven children. Among the seven, he was the second person. Lynd's paternal great grandfather immigrated from Scotland to Ireland. So the Robert Lynd's paternal great grandfather, he emigrated from Scotland to Ireland. Lynd was educated at Royal Belfast Academical Institution, studying at Queen's University. His father served a term as Presbyterian church moderator, but he was just one of a long line of Presbyterian clergy in the family. In 2003, essayist on Lynd recounts that his maternal grandfather, great grandfather, and great grandfather had all been Presbyterian clergymen. So this Robert Lynd was educated at Royal Belfast Academical Institution, later studying at Queen's University. After school education, he entered the Queen's University. His father served a term as Presbyterian church moderator. His father, that Robert John Lynd, he was served as the Presbyterian church moderator, but he was just one of a long line of Presbyterian clergy in the family. A 2003 essayist on Lynd recounts that his maternal grandfather, great grandfather, and great grandfather had all been Presbyterian clergymen. All his family members were the Presbyterian members. Robert Lynd's literary career. He began his career as a journalist on the Northern Wig in Belfast. He moved to London in 1901 via Manchester, sharing accommodation with his friend the artist Paul Henry. Firstly, he wrote drama criticism for Today, edited by Jerome K. Jerome. He also wrote for the Daily News, later the News Chronicle, being its literary editor 1912 to 47. This Robert Lane, he was started his career as a journalist the first time. For what? On the Northern Wig in Belfast. He was worked for the as a journalist. He was worked for the Northern Wig in Belfast. Later on, after that, from Belfast, he moved to London in 1901. After Belfast, from there he was moved to London in the year of 1901 via Manchester. He moved via Manchester, sharing accommodation with his friend the artist Paul Henry. So he shared his accommodation along with his friend that was the another artist Paul Henry. Firstly, he wrote drama criticism. This Robert Lynn was wrote the drama is for Today, edited by Jerome K. Jerome. He also wrote for the Daily News. Continuously, he was written the news for the Daily News. Later, the News Chronicle. After that, he moved to Daily News to the News Chronicle, being its literary editor in during 1912 to 1947. So during that period, he worked as a literary editor also. The Lynds were literary hostess in the group, including J.B. Priestley. They were on good terms also with Hugh Walpole. Priestley, Walpole and Sylvia Lynd were founding committee members of the Book Society. Irish guests included James Joyce and James Stephens. On one occasion reported by Victor Gollancz in Remembrance of Affection. Page 90, Joyce introed Anna Livia Floribele to his own piano accompaniment. The Lynds were literary hosts. These people, these Lynds, they were the literary hosts in the group, including in their group there were the other members were J.B. Priestley. They were on good terms also with Hugh Walpole, and it means they have good relation with that Hugh Walpole. Priestley, Walpole, and Sylvia Lynd were founding committee members of the Book Society. All these are the having good communication, and they were formed a good committee for the Book Society. Irish guests included James Joyce and James Stephens. On one occasion reported by Victor Gollancz in Remembrance of Affection. Joyce introed Anna Livia Floribele to his own piano accompaniment. He used the pseudonym YY. YY for yes or wise. Y for Y, yes for the Y for yes. Yes or wise. YY means yes or wise, means intelligent. In writing for the New Statesman, according to C.H. Ralph Kingsley in 1973, Lynd's weekly essay, which ran from 1913 to 1945, was irreplaceable in 1941. Sorry, irreplaceable In 1941, editor Kingsley Martin decided to alternate it with pieces by James Brady on Ireland. But the experiment was not at all a success. See, he was everybody knows every writer they use the pseudonyms for their writings. It means their nicknames. They won't use mostly the writers. They won't use their own names. They use the pen name. Pseudonym means their pen name. Here, YY. His pseudonym was YY. In writing for the New Statesman, according to C.H. Ralph Kingsley, Lynd's weekly essay, which ran from 1913 to 1945, was irreplaceable. It was not replaceable. That much of work he did. In 1941, editor Kingsley Martin decided to alternate it with pieces by James Brady on Ireland. But the experiment was not at all a success. That King's Martin, wanted to modify, he wanted to replace, but it was not become success. The replacement is he was a Robert Lynd. See, through this, the pleasures of ignorance, he was showing the differences, how we are asking the questions, and what is the ignorance, what is innocence, everything he has been showing through his this story short. It is impossible to take a walk in the country with an average townsman, especially perhaps in April or May, without being amazed at the vast content of his ignorance. It is impossible to take a walk in the country oneself without being amazed at the vast continent of one's own ignorance. Thousands of men and women live and die without knowing the difference between a beech and elm, between the song of a thrush and the song of a blackbird. Probably in a modern city, the man who can distinguish between a thrush and a blackbird song is the exemption. Now let us see what is the pleasures. What is the pleasures of ignorance? See, the pleasures of ignorance means it is asking the questions to know about. First of all, we should have an idea the difference between innocence and ignorance. Here, innocence means a child who does not have the knowledge on particular thing. It's called innocence. Ignorance means at the same time the child or a person who cannot differentiate the difference between the two things. To get the clarification, a person who asks the questions, it is called the pleasures of ignorance. Most of the times we face same type of questions. What is this? What is that? Like that. Here see this it was divided. This pleasures of ignorance was divided in three parts actually. One is the pleasure of ignorance, the other one is ignorance and discovery, and the third one is the pleasure of learning. Now let us see the pleasure of ignorance. Here it is impossible to take a walk in the country with an average townsman, especially perhaps in April or May, without being amazed at the vast content of his ignorance. See, a townsman in the country while he was moving, or it is not being amazed to find out the difference between April and May. See, it is impossible to take a walk in the country oneself without being amazed at the vast content of the one's own ignorance. See, to find out the clarification, to avoid his confusion, to find out the clear information, he raises the questions while he was wandering in the village or in the town, or while he was around moving here and there. He raises the questions. Here, let us see the simple thing. Thousands of men and women live and die without knowing the difference between a beech and an elm. Elm, see, thousands of men and women, not the thousands, it may be the lakhs of men and women in the world are dying without knowing the difference between that beech and elm. See, the meaning of beech and or elm, both are trees, but though the trees are different, but we know it is a tree, but we should know it is the tree, the what tree, what are the characters of the tree, that thing we should know, but without knowing the difference between the beech and elm, the lakhs of people or thousands of people are dying in the world day by day. And also some other thing, that is between the song of a thrush and the song of a blackbird. See the birds try with the with between the difference between the song of a thrush and the song of a blackbird. Both looks like the birds, but we should know the difference between the thrush bird and the blackbird. But we don't know what is thrushbird, what is blackbird. But if they sing, we feel it is the blackbird song or it is a thrushbird song. Probably in a modern city, the man who can distinguish between a thrush and a blackbird song is the exemption. In this modern city, the modern man, sorry, the modern people who are able to distinguish the between the thrushbird and the blackbird, it will be exempted. Now, it is not that we have not seen the birds. It is simply that we have not noticed them. We have been surrounded by birds all our lives. Yet so feeble is our observation that many of us could not tell whether or not the chaffinch sings or the color of the cuckoo. We argue like small boys as to whether the cuckoo always sings as he flies or sometimes in the branches of a tree, whether Chapman drew on his fancy or his knowledge of nature in the lines. See, it is not that we have not seen the birds. See, in the cities or somewhere else, we haven't seen the birds. So that's why we are unable to find out the differences. It is simply that we have not noticed them. Though they are rounding us, but we won't notice the birds. We have been surrounded by birds all our lives. Though the birds are surrounded by us, by the human beings, yet so feeble is our observation. But we are so weak in our observation. Though we are young, but we lose our sight in observation of the natural things. So we are very feeble is our observation, that many of us could not tell whether or not the chaffinch sings. So we won't observe clearly. That's why we cannot give the clear clarification whether it's the song of the chaffinch or some other, or the color of the cuckoo bird. Cuckoo means the nightingales. The cuckoo bird song or the nightingale song, whatever, what the song we cannot see. But we argue like small boys as to whether the cuckoo always sings as he flies or sometimes in the branch of a tree. But we will not be seen whether it is a chaffinch bird or a cuckoo bird. But we can say it is the song of the cuckoo bird song. Like we argue, like the boys, like the kids, whether Chapman drew on his fancy or his knowledge of nature in the lines. Now, when in the oak's green arms the cuckoo sings, and first delights men in the lovely springs. Say, when in the oak's green arms the cuckoo sings, it means the on the strong green tree, on the strong and green tree, the cuckoo sits and sings, and first delights men in the lovely springs. During the spring season, By the time the cuckoos sing the songs, it are the songs will delight the human beings, will delight the men, will attract the people. The voice is very sweet. It is called the pleasure of ignorance. Now the pleasure of discovery. This ignorance, however, is not altogether miserable. Out of it, we get the constant pleasure of discovery. Every facet of nature comes to us each spring, if only we are sufficiently ignorant with the dew still on it. See, the ignorance, however, is not altogether miserable. out of out of it we get the constant pleasure of discovery. The this uh, the, the this ignorance, it is not altogether together miserable, but sometimes it is out of it we get the constant pleasure of discovery. When we ask the questions, when we raise the questions, we can get some discovery things, we can get some new information, new things. Every facet of nature comes to us each spring. These things will happen. The nature is having the different phases. Different phases means, say, now this is the time of rainy season. It follows the winter season. It follows the spring season. It follows the summer season. Like the nature, it has different phases, different seasons. Like in the spring season also comes like one of them. If only we are sufficiently ignorant with the dew still on it. Okay, when we raise the questions as per the seasons, we can get the information like the dews still on it. If we have lived off a lifetime without having ever even seen a cuckoo, and know it only as a wandering voice, we are all the more delighted at the spectacle of its runaway flight as it hurries from wood to wood, conscious of its crimes, and at the way in which it hauls out like in the wind. See, here, if we have lived half a lifetime without having ever even seen a cuckoo, we are living without seeing half of the life the cuckoo birds, and know it only as wandering voice. But we are knowing the voice was wandering and also wandering. It's attractable, pleasurable, delightable. We are all the more delighted at the spectacle of its runaway. Its runaway flight as it hurries from wood to wood, conscious of its crimes. See, when we listen the song, when we listen the cuckoo's voice, it really we feel wonder how the flight runs, like we feel that. and and at the way in which it halts hawk like in the wine, its long tail querying. Its in the its long tail querying before it dares descend on a hillside of fir trees where avenging presences may lurk. And also the birds which comes to the hillside, they are also that enthusiastic. The inflict the harm uh, in return for, means they come and from the hillside they come for the food, and they try to escape from the human beings who are trying to harm them. It would be absurd to pretend that the naturalist does not also find pleasure in observing the life of the birds, but his is a steady pleasure, almost a sober, plodding occupation, comparing to the morning enthusiasm of the man who sees a cuckoo for the first time, and behold, the world is made new. Okay, see here, it would be absurd to pretend that the naturalist does not also find pleasure in observing the life of the birds. Here, say, the nature, it would be absurd to pretend that the naturalist does not also. So there is need not to pretend. The naturalist, when he observes the life of birds, he gets the enjoy, but his easy steady pleasure, almost how he feels means the how the sober, how the farmer and plodding occupation, when he is doing the his occupation, the farmer, he feels so happy. And compared to the morning enthusiasm of the man who sees a cuckoo for the first time, well, every day the farmer or a child or anybody, he comes with a new enthusiasm with morning, like the when we look at, when we listen to the cuckoo song or cuckoo bird the first time, and behold the world is made new. With that we can feel the world, with the nature the world is made new. We can enjoy the nature, like the Robert Lind, he was very clearly explained the pleasures of ignorance. Thank you, friends, for having the patience to listen my class. Thank you very much. Let's meet again by tomorrow with another topic.